What's up, guys? This is Bobby with East Carolina Rods. Another beautiful day here in Greenville, North Carolina at East Carolina Crescent Edge Jeep. Today, by my lonesome again, but life circumstances happen, and I meant to reach out to a couple people before I got into work last night, but had some family issues come up, and so it's just me today. But I just wanted to go over some things that I think are important to both consumers and to salespeople. This day and age especially is becoming more common because the cost is rising, everything going up. But my main topic for today is going to be leasing. So if you know about leasing, I mean, I'm pretty familiar with it. We don't do a ton of leasing here, but I'm just going to go over some of the highlights, some of the things that I think are important for a consumer to know, but also for a salesperson to know, because if you want to have longevity in this business, you got to start talking about leasing if you work at a new car franchise dealership like the Crescent Edge Jeep store I work at. So just to start off on some news, though, just to break in on what I think a lot of people are seeing out there in the wild now are the new Grand Wagoneers. We got our first few just this last week. Got to see it, put my hands on it, see some of the changes that are out there. And ultimately, I would say it's a refinement, almost more a refinement than a refresh, because it essentially is the same vehicle. There's no more high output though, so no more worries about premium fuel. At least for the time being, they have not announced that they're going to be implementing that. But that means you also are going to have a little less horsepower. So 420 horsepower though is plenty. In a bigger SUV like that, it needs it. But it just basically helps efficiency and helps the pocket of the consumer, in my opinion, to be able to get all the features that a Grand Wagoneer had in the previous generation. Now they're all called Grand Wagoneers now, but in the higher trim levels where you've got things like massage seats, you get into a Summit that has the the air suspension as well as the heads-up display and a lot of these other things that were premium features. And in last generation, you did not have the capability to get it, and the Wagoneer is the little rear view mirror that you can flip on and off to show a digital rear view camera on your mirror. So different things that they've basically refined and put into packages that make a little bit more sense, in my opinion. That kind of lines up more with how the Grand Cherokee has been for years, where you've got your Limited, which is the step up from the base model, and then you have in the new trim levels, the Limited Reserve, and then you go up from that, and that's the Summit, and then they have a Summit Reserve, and then they have the blackout appearance packages, which would be the Obsidian. And so some of the names have changed, but some of them have stuck around, like the Obsidian name, which I thought was always a cool sort of name anyways. In the Grand Cherokee, also a similar restructuring of the names. There's no more Overland in the Grand Cherokee trim level. So they basically tried to, I think, simplify it. One of the things that I saw that I thought was, I think, helpful for consumers and salespeople alike is that now the combinations are reduced on how many combinations of different packages you can get. The Grand Cherokee was in the hundreds. It was like 260 something combinations of different packages and different arrangements of equipment. And it just made it a little convoluted for everybody, including salespeople, when they go in. If you didn't know the window sticker and have looked at it before you showed a vehicle, you might have a Limited that had equipment that could have been more than an Overland, which sort of didn't make sense. You could get a Limited with the tech group and or the luxury tech group, and you would have a 360 camera, where the next one next to it was an Overland, and it had the massage seats, but not the 360 camera. It was kind of crazy how variables like that can just make it hard to understand. And I think that they simplified it. It's down to like 25 or maybe 35 at the most as far as different packages and combinations of equipment. So ultimately, it'll make it easier to know what you're looking at. You know, you look at it, you say it's a limited reserve. Well, you know, and the Grand Wagoneer is going to have the air suspension. You know, there's trim levels that I'm still learning. That's one that I overheard from somebody that does the ordering. I've got to do some research because I've got it all plugged into my mind from over the last 4 years of how the trim levels have been on the Wagoneer and knowing what series 1, 2, and 3 are. So I've got to go back to class. But basically, simplification of that stuff I think is a good thing. Even though we've got to learn a little bit, it's as salespeople, I think it'll be easier for people to grasp and for consumers to shop. So confused customers are not buying customers is what I've learned. And that's also why I wanted to go over leasing today. I think a lot of times it's looked at as something that's mysterious or like there's some kind of hidden things in the background going on with leasing. And it's actually pretty straightforward if you go in understanding and knowing what leasing really is and what some of the benefits are. I think it can really help both from the consumer side and the salesperson side. And I'll go over some of the things from the consumer side first because I've leased before and I actually had a really good experience with it. One of my leases I ended up keeping. So, you know, that's one big thing about leasing that some people maybe don't know or maybe just don't understand how it works. But when you lease a vehicle, you are allowed to buy it out at the end of your lease. And that's pretty cool if you like it. Now, ultimately, it doesn't end up saving you much money if you end up buying it out. You know, if your ultimate goal is over the next 6 years to save as much money towards your vehicle purchase, then leasing may not be the ideal way to do that as far as the end game of total money spent. But it gives you options. So leasing, generally speaking, can be a 2, a 3, or a 4 year deal. So 36 months is one of the more common ones nowadays. 39 months is a common lease term. And basically, that lease, over the duration of the time, you're basically splitting up your payments within that 39-month or 36-month or however long you do that lease. And then you have a mile limit that is basically what the leasing company is judging what that vehicle is going to be worth in that amount of time. So it's basically a gamble, but you're putting the gamble in the manufacturer, the leasing company's hands. So they are saying, okay, in 39 months, 39,000 miles, if you do a 10,000 mile a year lease, then you're going to be, or that would be a little less miles because 36 months, you'd have a 30,000 mile, lease because 12 months, but 10,000 miles. So a lot of people, to keep it simple, I'm going to say 12 month. 12,000 mile per year lease. So 39 months, you'd have a 39,000 mile vehicle. They're saying at the end of that term, basically that vehicle is going to be worth X amount. So say a vehicle MSRP is 50 grand. All right. Well, 50 grand, you're going to have a residual amount. And the residual is what the vehicle is going to be worth after that amount of time. The residual changes depending on what the miles are, how many months you do it, and then also the vehicle's potential for holding value. So for a long time, the Grand Cherokee has been a great lease because they hold their value well. But at the top of the list for a long time was the Wrangler because it's one of the best value holding vehicles in the world. Now, over the years, it's changed a little bit. The Wrangler still is really strong in its residuals. In fact, the Gladiator is right up there with it. So you say, for instance, on a Wrangler, you had your residual, and I'm going to be low on this, I'm sure, but 60%. So 50 times 60% is, we'll say 30 grand is what they are estimating it's going to be worth in that 3 years and 36,000 miles time period. Okay. So now what that means is at the end of that term, that's basically your buyout. And you're given your buyout when you purchase your lease. So just to recap here on the essentials of what a lease is, you've got your monthly payment, you've got your term length as far as how many months you're going to go, and then you also have your miles. And then the final factor from a consumer standpoint that's important to know is your residual, or what your buyout is. So your buyout after that time period, say at the end of the lease you decide, hey, I want to purchase that vehicle. Or maybe you went over your miles and you don't want to pay the penalty, because there is a penalty on miles. If you go 20,000 miles over your 36,000 mile limit, well, the penalty is probably going to be a little steep. Now, if you're a few hundred miles over or even 1,000 miles over, you're probably okay on penalties. Usually it's like a quarter per mile, or it might be 35 cents per mile, depending. So, I mean, it adds up quick, but if you're not very far over, the penalty might not be that bad. But you can buy it out. So you can buy out that lease, and it's essentially like refinancing. And if you've ever refinanced a car, basically, say 2 years into your term, you decide, okay, I'm tired of paying this 12% interest. Let's see what the rates are. You find out now you can get a 7% interest because your credit's been built up, and you get a much better rate now with your bank than what you got before. So you can go into that bank and say, hey, look, I want to refinance it. They say, okay, well, what's the buyout, or what's your payoff on your vehicle? That's essentially what a buyout is a payoff. So you go in, you do your payoff with them. They take that amount, they send it to the bank where that payoff is. They pay it off. Now you have the amount that is now with this new bank, and your payment goes down. You end up having a better rate. You're paying less over time. It would be really beneficial to do a refinance if your credit's improved, just in general when you're purchasing a vehicle, when you're financing it. But when you're leasing it, at the end of your term, it's essentially doing the same thing, because that buyout is with the leasing company. The consumer is given that special amount, and they take that amount and they send it to their bank and essentially do the same thing. They pay off your vehicle, or they do the buyout. They start you a new term. It might be 72 months. So, you have to think about this sort of thing when you're leasing and you're going to do a buyout. You could be essentially paying for this vehicle for 7, 8, 9 years, depending on how long you go on your refi or your buyout. So, that's why I say it could cost somebody more if you decide that you want to keep your lease. Now, the reason I bought mine out, my miles were super low. I had like 20,000 miles on a 36,000 mile lease. I didn't even use half my miles. But you know what didn't change? Was my buyout. My buyout stayed the same, because you're guaranteed that buyout price at the end of your lease. No matter what your miles are, no matter what you've done to the car, say you put a 3-inch lift on your Wrangle, you spent $4,000 to do that. Well, if you turn in your lease, you don't get that back. In that instance, you might want to buy out your lease because, hey, say you like it, you love it a lot, you want to keep the vehicle, you got that option. So, in short, buy it out. Sometimes for people makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. But you have that option as a consumer. And that's something as a salesperson you need to be able to also reiterate to a customer, is that you're not necessarily going to have to turn the keys in, but in the lease you have that option. And that's what leasing gives you, is a lot of options for your lease. So 3 years from now, when the lease is due up, you have multiple options. You can turn it in. You can wipe the slate clean. Say the vehicle got into an accident, the value dropped by 20% compared to what your buyout is, and you want to get out of that. You don't want to own that negative equity. You can get rid of it. You can say goodbye, turn in the keys, just as long as it meets the inspection requirements, which are like having tires that pass an inspection level, not having any major dents, dings, or scratches. They give you a little credit card size per panel. I think you get 2 or 3 per panel. So you're not, you don't have to keep your car perfect. But, if you got tears in the seat, or you got all these things, say you put your dog in there and you rip the headrest off, you're going to have some penalties. But if you've kept it clean, which most people know when they lease a vehicle, you got to keep it pretty pristine and take well care of it. Basically, you turn it in and you get to do a new lease, for instance, or say you want to purchase this next time around, you don't have to carry that negative equity over, which in 3 years in some vehicles, say if you pay slow on a vehicle or you do a 7-year term, an 84-month term, by 3 years you might not be caught up with your negative equity yet, and you might have some carryover from that loan into the new vehicle. So that's one of the benefits too of leasing, is you have that option to just turn it in and be free and clear and start over a new loan or a new lease. You also have the option as a consumer to trade it in. Now, say you do have equity. Now, within the first 3 months before your lease term is up, you'll probably get a salesperson calling you up if they're worth their salt, because that's what we're supposed to do, is reach out to you when your lease maturation date or your time to turn it in is coming up. Within that 3-month window, we are able to take whatever you owe on that vehicle, your buyout, and we can buy that vehicle. So say your lease miles are really low and you really just decided you don't like that vehicle that much, but you find out, hey, they can buy this vehicle for $3,000 or $4,000 more than what my buyout is. Well, that's equity. That's like down payment towards your next purchase. So you've got a really big advantage if you don't decide to keep it and you have kept your miles off and you're taking really good care of your vehicle. So you have the potential to use that equity. Now, if you get too close, a lot of leasing companies will lock it in and they'll say, no, sorry, only you can buy out your vehicle. It's usually within the 30 days of your maturation date. But in general, I don't. The leasing companies have gotten a little bit more stringent on that because during COVID, people were buying out their or they would sell their vehicles instead of letting the leasing company have it. And they saw their potential for money going away. So ultimately, it all comes down to money. They're the ones holding the bag, and then suddenly it's like they got robbed of the equity that they could have had. So they made a requirement within the 30 days. The maturation date or when you go to turn it in. If you haven't decided yet, and the leasing company has decided for you, you're going to either turn that in or you're going to buy it out yourself. But within that 3-month window, that's your golden moment to be able to take advantage as a consumer of that buyout being less than what the value of the vehicle is. So salespeople, stay in touch with your customers, because that could be money in their pocket going towards the new purchase, which in our world, buying a new vehicle or leasing a new vehicle is a new sale for us. And every 3 months, having that cycle coming along is money in the pocket. And, you can kind of count on certain people to want to trade and do their lease every month, because look, there are some big advantages to having leasing. You're under your factory warranty during that time period. You're going to have basically, when some of our products, some of your maintenance covered, because you'll have 2 oil changes, 2 tire rotations included. So your first year and a half of driving the vehicle is cost free, except for like gas and maybe rotating your tires, and if you drive a lot. And then you got the advantage of having the newest and latest, greatest technology. So if you are used to having certain comforts and that sort of thing, leasing tends to be a way to be able to get all the latest stuff without having the higher payment of always trading every 3 years and continuing to see the price of things go up, because leasing does tend to be quite a bit cheaper than financing. You're taking that 60% and you're splitting it up in 36 months. Basically, just a math equation, you're paying less on a lease, generally speaking. Now, if you got 15,000 miles a year on a 42-month lease on something that doesn't hold its value well, it might end up being a wash. That's why it always pays to just see what leasing specials are out there, talk to your sales consultant, and find out what a lease looks like with just maybe a couple $1,000s down. But again, going back to the lease term end, so you got the option to buy it out. If you want to keep your vehicle as a consumer, you can buy it out. You can trade it in, have that equity go towards the new vehicle purchase, and then you also could, be as a way to think about this in a different way. You could buy it out and then sell it, or you could use it, as a trade-in if you're in that 30-day window. That's kind of a hack, that if you are in that 30-day window and you're like, dag, I didn't have a chance to figure out whether I wanted to keep it or turn it in. I want to have the option 3 months from now. Well, you can buy it out and then trade it in 2 months later or something like that, and utilize that equity if you have some equity. So you're not stuck if you're in that 30-day window and you haven't decided yet what you want to do. You can buy it out and decide a little later. I would only recommend doing that though if you're in an equitable position. Say you're $2,000 or $3,000 less than what your buyout is on value. And you may want to consider not doing that, because then you're carrying over a little if you're going to trade it in. So you just got to have that conversation. You got to really consider when you're doing a lease what your ultimate goal is. I want a lower payment. Okay. Do I drive a lot? Okay. Do I like to be in something new under warranty? Okay. Well, if you don't mind not doing a bunch of modifications to your vehicle, leasing may be right up your alley. And leasing is a really big advantage for salespeople. And this is where I'll cut to what the advantages for salespeople are, is that you got a potential customer for life that's going to come and see you every 3 years. Now, they may end up deciding that they don't particularly like our brand, and they decide, 3 years later, hey, I really don't want to do this. I want to try a different brand. And you can try to get them into a pre-owned vehicle. But ultimately, most people that buy our product, especially Grand Cherokees, the Wagoneer, the Wrangler, a lot of those people are tried and true Jeep people, and they will come back to you. They usually have a good experience. I've had a lot of people do that with their Grand Cherokees, where they'll lease one, they'll come back in, turn it in, and lease a new one. And they get some of the new things like this new refresh that came out. So right now, especially if people are getting close to the end of their lease, it'd be a good time to reach out to them and say, hey, look, if you haven't seen or driven the new Grand Cherokee, they've made some improvements, and they've streamlined the packages, so I can talk to you about it a little easier too, instead of having to decide between 16 different levels and packages and all the in-between packages of those. So it's important to stay in touch with your customers, and leasing is one of those things that I think a lot of people are misconstrued about, that, oh man, at the end of my lease, I'm going to end up owing a bunch of penalties. And I drive too much. I don't know what leasing really means. Doesn't that mean that I can't get out of this vehicle? Am I stuck in this thing? And some of those things, I think, just to clarify, in the 2.5 years that you own your lease, you're pretty well in that thing. You're not going to very easily be able to get out of it without some penalties. You can just pay off your lease and turn it in early, but it tends to be expensive to do that way early in, say a year in. It just doesn't make sense to do it. So I would say make sure you like whatever you're going to lease, at least for the next 2 or 3 years. But the next thing is, the mileage thing. So you can go up to 15,000 miles, and you can actually purchase more miles. So there's some advantages to keeping your miles low, because you want to make sure your payment's not too high. But you can buy more miles and put that on top of the lease if you're worried, hey, I drive to Florida every month, and that's gonna rack them up. Well, you can do a 15,000 mile lease, and 15,000 miles a year is about average, and that's even with people taking trips. I don't drive a lot personally, and that's why leasing made a lot of sense to me. I've got a 5-mile commute, and I don't do a lot of traveling, but also I have a second car. So the next lease that I do, I've got something to drive in case, say I'm going to take a long trip, and I don't necessarily need my new Grand Cherokee for the space and everything. I got my little sedan that's paid for, and I ain't got to worry about the miles being put on there. So if you got a second vehicle, consider that you're going to be spreading those miles out too. So leasing makes a lot of sense for a lot of people out there. Just a matter of knowing what leasing is. And this video really is more for this podcast, I should call it. I'm just basically talking to a camera, but I'm talking to you, salespeople. This is very important stuff to know because leasing is not all that complicated. When you're presenting figures, I would say just go over what it is, and some of those advantages, that you can have a lesser payment and you're not really stuck in the vehicle like a lot of people think you are at the end of your lease. You can buy it out, you can keep it, and if you drive a lot, you can buy more miles. And if you like to be in the latest, greatest, newest thing, but don't want to pay that extra $150, $200, or say stretch it out 84 months, where in 2-3 years you're going to have negative equity. Those are things that are big advantages for customers. And most people that want to trade often and stay in something new, leasing makes a lot of sense. So you got to have that conversation, and when you're presenting numbers, you can show them the option for leasing compared to financing. You got to have okay credit. That's one of the things. You can't go in with a 550 beacon usually in lease, and sometimes I'm surprised, you might be able to, but generally speaking, you got to have a 600, 620 or better beacon and have some car loan history. And it does help to have cash down, because you want to at least cover your tax, fees, and tags. Because say you're looking at online and you see that there's a lease special on something, and that's a national lease, and that lease is being broadcast to the whole country. So every dealership being different in different regions, you have different money down situations, because their taxes, fees, and tags will vary from state to state, and even from county to county sometimes, depending on the state. So just keep in mind that tax, fees, and tags in those national lease ads is not included. So that's $399 or $39.99 due at signing. Well, that's $39.99 due at signing plus your tax, fees, and tags. And that's just to keep things clear with your customer when you're going over why this lease special maybe doesn't line up exactly to what you're seeing on the Jeep.com website, because Jeep is advertising it to the whole country. They don't know where these people are going to be that are going to be purchasing it, and what the taxes are going to be, or what dealer fees are involved. So just communicate clearly, and don't get scared about it. You're going to have to practice talking about it as a salesperson, because ultimately I've talked about it a few times, and even I stumble a little bit on what I'm talking about, because I have to gear my brain back and say, oh yeah, well, there are these sort of loopholes to get out of a lease early, or there's these things that are available from a consumer standpoint. If you want to buy it out early, there's all these different caveats, but generally leasing is pretty straightforward. And if somebody leases every 3 years, like I say, as a salesperson, that's money in the bank. You can count on them coming back to you every 3 years. You just got to stay in touch with them. And that's ultimately my message for today. Talking about leasing, all the new product stuff is awesome. But as a salesperson, I think it's very important, if you're working a new franchise dealership, that you know about leasing. It can potentially grow your residual income massively by having that regular customer base coming back to you every 3 years for their next lease. We're always going to have exciting products. We're always going to have things available that people are going to want that are new in the vehicle. And most people want to be under warranty while they have their vehicle. And so leasing just makes a lot of sense. But that's my spiel for today. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. I know it's a long talk about leasing, but I think this is an important conversation to have, and hopefully you got some stuff from it. I have a feeling that a lot of salespeople might get from this. Maybe consumers do too, but if you guys watch this and have any questions about leasing, I'll be glad to try to answer some questions for you. But talk to your finance manager or talk to your sales manager, and they can also give you some insight on what leasing is and how it can benefit you and the consumer. And of course, thank you again for coming along on the ride with me here at East Carolina Rides. Y'all stay excellent. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. Bye-bye.